Hi everyone, hope you're all well, and if you're looking forward to the coronation on Saturday, hope you're going to enjoy it. What we're going to be discussing is the history of some of the coronation regalia, and what I wanted to start our series off with is a view of this, and this is an exact replica of the Tudor Imperial State Crown, which was made for Henry VII or Henry VIII. They're not quite sure which, more than likely Henry VIII because of the man's ego. And this crown was made for one of those two kings and was made to be as magnificent and splendid as possible. As you can see, the cuts of the stones were very different in those days. They were cabochon cuts, and they don't gleam and sparkle like the gemstone cuts in ours, brilliant cuts. So those crowns fell out of fashion after a while. This crown, sadly, if you're a royalist, was destroyed under the protectorate of Oliver Cromwell. All the gems were taken out and sold, and the gold was melted down. And the gold from it in those days, I think it only fetched about £16. And the crown was originally extremely heavy to wear, which is when King Charles I was painted with the crown, that's why it was shown on a table next to him rather than upon his head. But first, I'd like to discuss a little bit of the history or the meanings of an imperial state crown. What is an imperial state crown, and what is the difference between that and other crowns? Before our royal families started wearing an imperial state crown in the medieval period, this is what they would have worn: a circlet crown, which is just an open gold crown with gemstones or whatnot encrusted into it. There are no arches and there's no cross above. A circlet crown like you can see on the head of Edward I here. The difference between those and this are merely the arches and having the cross or an orb on top. That's what makes it an imperial crown. And come the time of the Tudors, a circlet crown would never have been good enough for old Harry VIII, would it? Not for his magnificence, bless his little fat cottons. So they wanted something a bit more splendid. Bearing that and the fact that the Holy Roman Emperor had an imperial state crown that is still around today and was a very magnificent and beautiful thing. So our royal family wanted one, and they got one, and it lasted for 150 years plus, thereabouts, and then was destroyed in the reign of Cromwell. But as I say, our main focus today on the crowns is going to be two gemstones that are set into that crown. The very oldest, which is the St. Edward sapphire, which you can see set into the cross right at the very top of the crown. The second oldest is set into the next cross at the crown lower down, and that's known as the Black Prince's ruby, although it's actually a spinel rather than a ruby. The imperial state crown that we have today looks similar to this one. This is the imperial state crown of Queen Victoria, but ours is lower down and much lighter, and our imperial state crown was made from this one, and you can see that when you look at it. Interestingly enough, the little drop pearls that lie just below the orb and St. Edward's sapphire, those pearls are believed to have belonged to Queen Elizabeth I. So there's some real historical gems in our crown, and some that have caused quite some problems. Cullinan. Queen Victoria at her coronation wearing her imperial state crown, which she wrote in her diary was frightfully heavy and made her head hurt. It did weigh an awful lot. That's one of the reasons why that heavy crown was rendered down and turned into this one, which is the imperial state crown we see today. This is the imperial state crown that was made in 1937. Interestingly enough, if you look at the crown, and the Queen will discuss this in our video, this crown that we see now is slightly smaller and lower down, which was adapted for her. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I heard a couple of rumours that they may adapt it into a taller crown again, like was worn by the Queen's father, because this crown can be taken down and adapted and adjusted. So we shall see at the coronation whether that's done. As I say, our main ports of call for this little video is the crown itself, of course, which is a beautiful thing. There is going to be a little bit of naughty in-pocket filming you'll see in this one. Literally only a 17 second snippet because filming in the jewel house is so prohibited. But you know me, and I do like to share interesting experiences with you. So for 17 seconds, you'll get to see the real Imperial State Crown filmed from London Luke's pocket. But as I say, our main focus firstly is on St Edward's sapphire. That sapphire ring he holds here, which was believed to be his coronation ring, and its history is older than any of the other gemstones in the royal collection. The stone is thought to have been in the coronation ring of Edward the Confessor, known later as St Edward, who ascended to the throne of England in 1042, just 24 years before the Norman conquest. Edward, one of the last Anglo-Saxon kings of England, was buried with the ring on his finger at Westminster Abbey in 1066. Skip forward to the year 1163 and St Edward the Confessor's body was exhumed. The coffin opened and it was discovered that he hadn't decomposed, which was one of the reasons he was made a saint. The ring was taken from his finger, and the sceptres that were in his coffin were taken out as well, and they became part of the regalia. Those sceptres were destroyed in Cromwell's time. But one of the reasons they opened the coffin up was because Henry III, who had the abbey that we see today entirely built around the shrine of St Edward, wanted Edward, who wasn't a saint at that time, he wanted him made a saint. So they opened the coffin and discovered that he hadn't rotted away, which was one of the reasons that led to his sainthood, as well as other miracles occurring around him. But as I say, that's a story for another time. How the gem survived the English Civil War in the 17th century is not clear, but it was most likely recut into its present form for Charles II after the restoration of the monarchy. Queen Victoria added the jewel into her Imperial State Crown, giving it a leading role in the centre of the cross at the top of the crown, where it remains today in the similar crown last worn by Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. St Edward's sapphire is on public display with other crown jewels within the jewel house of the Tower of London, although filming and photography is strictly prohibited in there. The sapphire is believed to have originated from Asia, potentially either from Afghanistan or Sri Lanka, which have been famed for their gem-producing corundum deposits since ancient times. And that's our first little gemstone in the crown. And the next one we're going to be discussing, now we leave St Edward's sapphire, which we'll next see at the coronation, is the Black Prince's ruby. And this is an effigy of the Black Prince on his tomb. There are no images of him from his time, so I rely on these kinds of things to try and keep it as original as I can. And this is the Black Prince's ruby. As I say, it's actually a spinel, but the Black Prince's ruby is actually a large, irregular cabochon red spinel, weighing 170 carats, which is 34 grams, set into the cross pate above the Cullinan II diamond at the front of the Imperial State Crown. The spinel is one of the oldest parts of the crown jewels, like St Edward's sapphire, with a history dating back to the middle of the 14th century. It has been in the possession of England's rulers since it was given in the year 1367 to its namesake, Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince. And he was known as the Black Prince because of his armour. His armour was blackened with gold chasing on it, that's why he was known as that. The stone is believed to have originated from the Badakhshan mines in present-day Afghanistan and Tajikistan, the principal source of the large spinel gemstones in the Middle Ages. In 1366, Don Pedro's illegitimate brother Henry of Trastamara led a revolt against Don Pedro. Lacking the power to put down the revolt unaided, Don Pedro made an alliance with the Black Prince, who was the son of King Edward III. The revolt was successfully put down, and the Black Prince demanded the ruby in exchange for the services he had rendered. He later returned to England with two of King Pedro's daughters, Dona Constanza of Castile and Donna Isabella of Castile. The marriages were contracted for them to the king's brothers. It was assumed that the Black Prince took the ruby back to England at the same time, although it disappears from historical records until 1415. During his campaigns in France, Henry V of England wore a gem-encrusted helmet that included the Black Prince's ruby. At the Battle of Agincourt on the 25th of October 1415, the French Duke of Alençon struck Henry on the head with a battle axe, and Henry nearly lost both helmet and his life. The battle was won by Henry's forces, and the Black Prince's ruby was saved. Richard III is supposed to have worn the gemstone in his helmet at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, in which he was killed. Cromwell sold the gemstone for £4. It was originally set into. Later on, it was set into the Imperial State Crown of Queen Victoria. So basically, when this gemstone, which is beyond value now, was sold in the reign of Cromwell, £4. That's all it sold for. But that's like the equivalent of £5,500 nowadays. And as I say, Queen Victoria was the first person to have the stone set into the Imperial State Crown. Queen Victoria's Imperial State Crown was remade in 1937 into the current lighter Imperial State Crown we see today. A placard on the reverse of the gemstone commemorates the crown's history. So this gemstone is so big that it can have a little placard on the reverse side of it. And that's the history of our two first oldest pieces. And now we're going to head off to the tower first for a little bit of naughty in-pocket filming, and then after that you'll hear the Queen speak. And I hope you've all enjoyed this, because I won't be able to say it at the end. Thank you for watching. And here we're going to get our first little snippet of the crown with, as you can see at the top, St Edward's sapphire, and as blurry as it is, you can still see the great big Black Prince's ruby. Such pretties. Cool sparkle, look. That's lovely, isn't it, eh?
If the Queen has only worn St Edward's gold crown once, she is much more familiar with this, the diamond-encrusted Imperial State Crown. She wore it at the end of her coronation and for most state openings of Parliament since.
You see, it's much smaller, isn't it? I mean, it was the same height. You know, it would have been up to about there when my father wore it.
I mean, it was huge then.
Yes, very unwieldy.
It's difficult to always remember that diamonds are stones, so they're very heavy.
Yes. Fortunately, my father and I have about the same sort of shaped head. Mm. But once you put it on, it stays. I mean, it just remains itself.
You have to keep your head very still.
Yes. And you can't look down to read the speech. You have to take the speech up. Because if you did, your neck would break, or it would fall off. So there are some disadvantages to crowns, but otherwise they're quite important things.